Welcome back. Secretary Kerry leaves for Geneva in a few hours to negotiate a Syria peace deal with the Russians. Meanwhile, President Obama's apparent strategy of ultimately talking tough, then acting weak, is hurting his credibility and driving some people nuts. Listen to what Republican Senator Bob Corker told CNN.
The president just seems to be very uncomfortable being commander-in-chief of this nation.
Let me ask you, Congressman, when you have Senator Corker, who's the ranking Republican on foreign relations and who carried the resolution with Senator Menendez, so he's tried to be an ally of the president, when you get that kind of very direct language, essentially expressing despair, doesn't that concern you about the president's ability to work with the Congress?
Look, you know, I think the American people are just tired of that kind of hyperbole. They want leaders with responsible solutions, not leaders who spend all of their time engaged in that kind of blame. I would also remind Senator Corker, when he questions the comfort level of this president, that this president was very comfortable killing Osama bin Laden.
And ending the Iraq War, and bringing to an end the
right.
Afghanistan War. And Congresswoman Blackburn, I have a question for you. Do you think Senator Corker is worried about his politics at home with that statement?
No, I don't. I think Senator Corker is expressing the frustration of the vast majority of the American people. This is an issue of leadership. And whether you're talking about the Syria situation, the lack of attention of it, a president who, as a U.S. senator and state senator, voted present, basically what he did with the Syria situation over the past week was begin by voting present. You had Secretary Kerry go out and make a speech. Then the president meets with his
bringing
national
Assad to his knees
team,
and Russia to the table is acting weak.
I would disagree.
That's not
with
a
you.
strong
I
act.
think that the president has been very weak on the national stage, and I think that the ones who have gotten attention on both sides of the aisle for standing firm has been the members of the U.S. House of Representatives that, whether it's the
absolutely, with their
caucus
critique,
or the conservatives,
you have been very good with your critique, but I still cannot understand what you would do differently than the president with the plan that I outlined.
What I would do differently. First of all, a president has to be the commander-in-chief and the decisive leader. And what the president did was to take this issue and then he fumbled it. He said, here you go to the House. Look at David Axelrod's tweet.
You don't want to vote on
out there.
I told you how I would vote.
No, I would vote no.
Well, you already did vote on that, actually. You already did vote. Look, I respect your view, but you and 400 other members of Congress voted for the Syria Accountability Act, which emphatically and specifically states that we should not allow Syria to attain weapons of mass destruction.
Everyone agrees on
so when
that.
you say that the House, well, you may agree on the passage of the bill, but how do you hold that regime accountable for the Syria Accountability Act?
And we have continued to talk about that.
And how do you do it?
But I'm fascinated.
I think there's only one way to do it, and that's to put the use of force on the table, which, as a result, that brought Russia to the table to help us negotiate a peace process.
I'm not sure that
if our allies are coming to the table,
Russia
how do you get to the table?
But I know there's this whole line which starts with the SEALs having killed bin Laden and then goes on to other great
taken in
things.
by the Special Operations Forces from Fort Campbell in my district.
Authorized by the Commander-in-Chief.
Authorized by the Commander-in-Chief.
I think it was
God bless them.
But here's my question. When you have the Secretary of State describe, quote, an unbelievably small attack. That was London just before the Russians bailed us out.
But Newt, that unbelievably small attack.
Unbelievably small.
You know who listened to that? Assad. And Assad finally admitted that it has chemical weapons and will turn it over to the international community. Putin heard it and finally admitted to take part in this peace process. They heard it loud and clear.
I don't think Assad.
However small you think it was pretty loud over there.
I think, Newt, you're making a process argument, the process that went into where we are now. And I appreciate that. You're a historian. In fact, you endorsed my book on military history and doubled its sales from 6 to 12. You know who's really interested in presidential process and who said what?
As an author, you always get the title of your book in.
Charge. The people who are really interested in the process that lead to a policy are presidential historians. But the American people care about the outcome.
Right.
And we want this outcome to be the degradation and the deterrence of Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles. So who cares who said what?
You're doing something that's very specific. I don't disagree with it necessarily. You're doing something very specific here. We've had the president and many other people say over 2 years' time, Assad has to go. Okay? The president talked even last night about degrading and about getting rid of Assad, et cetera. The fact is, if Putin pulls this off, Assad will be strengthened and stabilized. Now, we will achieve something that's historic. I'm not disagreeing with that. But are you comfortable, as a person who's pretty expert in the region, are you comfortable with Assad, in effect, winning on the survival and giving up chemical weapons, but winning in terms of the survival of the regime?
I am more comfortable with that than any of the other scenarios that we have outlined, including Nusra acquiring those chemical weapons, Iran being empowered to use weapons of mass destruction, North Korea taking a look at Syria and saying, well, we've got a bunch of U.S. troops on the border. Why don't we try that? Yeah. I'm more comfortable with that scenario than the others.
I also think that your statement that this guarantees Assad stays in power is absolutely wrong. Because the only way... Absolutely wrong. Because the only way... I only speak in absolutes.
Could have the potential to be.
Okay.
Look, the only way that we're going to remove chemical weapons from Syria is if there is some sort of a ceasefire on the ground, which means that the Syrian people are no longer getting killed by their own dictator, which means that we can focus on a political solution, which was what the president is bringing the world together to do. And that means that the European Union, NATO, Jordan, Israel, Turkey, all of our allies come together and send a message to Assad and isolate him. And the other thing that I think is going on here is Putin is saying to Assad, like, look, buddy, I can save you from going to the criminal court. I can save you from getting the death penalty because you violated a world standard here, killed your own people with gas. So we're going to work out a solution here, and you can come live in Russia.
Well, the question I've got is, one, I think Putin's not suggesting that. I think what Putin is saying is, you agree to this, we will reinforce you during the ceasefire, we will make sure you have plenty of conventional equipment. Between us and the Iranians, you will survive. Your choice is not survival if we withdraw. I mean, I don't think it was the Kerry speech. I think it was the Putin phone call that changed Assad's view.
Well, and Newt, one of the things that I think would cause us concern is Russia trying to do this. Are they not being honest in their brokering? Are they trying to do this just so they can sell weapons to Syria? And
well,
we'd have to say no to that. That's exactly right. And that's...
that would have to be part of the deal. If there's a ceasefire, you've got to stop selling weapons
if they are
to Syria.
And that means everybody also stops supplying the rebels?
Well, we need to see how that works out. But you can't have a ceasefire with weapons coming over the border.
And you want to know what Russia's motive is in this.
You know what Russia's motive is, Marsha.
Well, we want to make certain that that is trust and verify.
And part of this is exposing Russia's motive.
Right.
And by exposing Russia's motive, hopefully their motive is in good faith, trying to rid Syria of chemical weapons. But if it's not in good faith, then it only strengthens our hand at the United Nations to isolate Russia and show what their motives are.
In a stronger position if this president had the ability to act with more authority. And I think that that is something that is frustrating to the American people. He does seem very uncomfortable when it comes to foreign policy issues. And I had one of my retired military retirees that had worked in Intel who was looking at this and said, why does everything end up in a crisis situation with him? Why does he seem to make decisions
Marsha, well, you were around for 8 years of the Bush
the
administration.
Al-Qaeda? And there are plenty of times.
I'll tell you. Let's talk about crisis. Let's talk about crisis. We have a situation in Iraq. We were enmeshed, and in Iraq, we are now out of Iraq without crisis. We went into Afghanistan. The crisis was that we did not go into Afghanistan with proper force. President Obama decided to authorize a surge. That was a pretty significant, decisive act. And we're winding down in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was alive.
Let's
now
talk about another crisis.
So tell me what part of that means he's not willing to use his authority.
Paying our men and women in uniform a $400 billion cut, followed by a sequestration of $500 billion.
Let's turn it off.
Before we go into, before he says he wants to go do something with Syria, the president chose to cut that 1.6% pay raise that our men and women in uniform were going to get down to 1%. So they're going to get
turn it off. We've been trying to turn it off, and I'll tell you how we can do it, and it's a reasonable way to do it.
Keep it
instead
on
of keeping
rest
it sequestered in order to protect $40 billion.
backfill those dollars for the U.S.
Okay.
military.
Thank you. Thanks to Steve Israel.
Oh, it's just getting good.
And Marsha Blackburn. It was just getting good, but we can do it again. Next, we ceasefire. Here's one thing we can agree on. Crossfire's getting noticed, even at the White House. We'll show you next.